It will never not amaze me how fast the flow of time continues to pummel me into the ground. I've jokingly said for years that as an early 30-something guy online that I am perpetually a foot away from the grave. But now as I look at the calendar and see that it's already February of the year 2026, that feeling of bewilderment has reached new heights, or maybe in this case, new distances. I long for the days when I was merely a foot away from the grave because now I'm in the realm of inches. Still plenty of inches to go, mind you, but as I turn 35 this year, I have to accept that the era of the foot is behind me. But with this new year and this looming existential crisis comes another batch of video games to look forward to, be impressed by, as well as be disappointed by. But as we venture into the second month of 2026, let us remain hopeful and positive about the potential that the year brings. In terms of video games, I'm not talking about the hellscape that we currently live in. There are a significant amount of games to look forward to this year, both big AAA games and small little indie dev teams both, and I want to highlight a bunch of them right here for you so you can also get hyped as well, because some of these games might blow your mind. Here are my most anticipated games of 2026. My personal experience with the Onimusha series is pretty mild, if I'm being honest. I played through all of the first game and put, 4, maybe 5 hours into the second one. Well, I think that the concept behind them originally was always on the safe side of brilliant, which is a melee-focused action variant of the classic Resident Evil games. I think that Onimusha 1, while a great time, does suffer from some very mild issues that I go over in a very early video of mine if you're interested, which I will link here. All of this is to say, when the new Onimusha was announced, I was stoked to see the IP come back from the dead, but I wasn't really hyped on it, even though it was possible at the time that it still could have been a Souls-like, which is something that could have easily been the case given the current climate of video games. But while the information on Onimusha has been generally sparse, what has been revealed about the game since its announcement has my hype levels very high. It looks appropriately weird, comically dark, zany, and while not limited to the fixed cameras of old, its emphasis on action seems to lie more along the lines of a significantly more grounded type of character action game. Think Devil May Cry, but more realistic? At least when it comes to the combat that's been shown. With a heavy emphasis on action, a seemingly wide variety of weapons, and an apparent focus on detailed dismemberment, Onimusha is a game that while I guess I'm technically more cautiously hopeful for, I'm still very hyped to play. Capcom usually doesn't miss nowadays, and I think its mere existence alone gives way to a lot of initial hype, regardless of my history with the franchise. Even though I do kind of wish it was a Souls-like. Tower of Tears is a game that has been in the works for what feels at least like 4 years at this point. I've seen updates about it back when I was still on X, and yes, I'm using that term derogatorily. If you're not aware of Tower of Tears, it's described by its creator to be, quote, a non-linear survival horror game with 3D Metroidvania elements, an invitation to peek at a foreboding poetic world populated by ambiguous cute characters and subtly disturbing beings. Now, if I hear the words survival horror and Metroidvania in the same sentence, I immediately perk my ears up. I've said for years that survival horror games, in the classic sense especially, are at their core a spooky Metroidvania. And if the developer themselves is the one saying that, my hopes are already very high right out of the gate. But that alone isn't enough to make it one of my most anticipated games of the year. What pushes it over the top for me is, just look at this game, dude! Tower of Tears radiates a vibe that is straight out of a surrealist dreamscape that feels like it came from the depths of my soul. Everything from the wide open interior vistas that feel like a modern take on a game like Yume Nikki, with never-ending cascading darkness hiding repeating psychedelic patterns of evil, truly unsettling monster designs that is seriously straight out of a nightmare, but one that you somehow almost immediately find a strange comfort in, and presumably fun and interesting side characters that you will interact with. Time will tell if the game can fulfill on its promise of being a high-quality Metroidvania, as my standards of them are generally quite high, but if the game can succeed in the atmosphere department, and honestly, there's no reason why I don't have faith that it will, I have a feeling that just being in this game's world will be more than enough. What do you get when you mix Inscription with Solitaire and just add a dash of Balatro influence? You get Forbidden Solitaire. Doing an astounding job at mimicking the look and feel of the aesthetics of a 90s point-and-click game, but adding the modern flair of turning a classic game like Solitaire on its head with a whole new unique system of play, as well as unique setups depending on whether or not you're experiencing a puzzle or an enemy encounter. And yes, you do fight enemies in this Solitaire game, as well as unique abilities that you earn to level up your runs that you get from an eyeball in the wall. Forbidden Solitaire is easily one of my most anticipated games of the year, and it comes out really soon. It might even be out by the time this video is done. Forbidden Solitaire takes the concept of Solitaire and makes the inherent gameplay systems of it a bit more simple, turning the gameplay of having to line up rows consecutively, and turns it into a game of having to find a card that is either one rank higher or lower than your available card. So if your card is a 5, then you have to look for a 4 or a 6. If you pick a 6, your available card is now a 6, so now you have to look for a 5 or a 7. What makes this system so enticing is the potential of a flurry of combos where you just erase either a pile, a line, or a multiple all in one go. It is possible to sit there and strategize well enough, and it is possible to get a series of 7 or higher in a row that just feels amazing. Yes, when it comes down to it, it is more simple than a traditional game of Solitaire, but the added spicy flavor of either a combat encounter or having to solve a puzzle makes the more simplistic nature of the game still have enough bite and crunch to its decision making that makes Forbidden Solitaire genuinely addicting. And all of the praise that I'm throwing at it is not even touching the meta-narrative of the game that has you, as a character, playing a CD copy of this game from the 90s that you found in a thrift store and slowly uncovering the mysteries and potential conspiracies that made this game such a controversial release at the time in the game's universe. The short demo that is available on Steam has already been beaten by me at least 3 times, and I can't wait to see what the full game has to offer. Part of me can't really believe that I'm putting this game on this list, but after having played the demo a handful of times, I gotta say, childhood me would have been all over this game and would have been beyond hyped that a game that feels this good and has this much vibrant personality is coming out around the corner. Growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, quality platformers were not all that hard to come by and were the staple of basically all video game consoles until about the 360 era. They still came out, and still do, but with the exception of basically every mainline Mario game and the rare exception of something like Astro Bot in 2024, platformers aren't really making front-page headlines in the gaming sphere. So what makes Bubsy 4D so special and why it's so high on my list is that not only does the demo that is out right now really impress me by feeling really good, with excellent jump control and an emphasis on pretty significantly differing mobility abilities, but Bubsy 4D is incredibly unique in the sense that it's the redemption arc of a franchise that has been a joke in the gaming world for its entire existence. Bubsy as a franchise has been the butt of jokes on gaming YouTube since basically like 2006 when the subgenre of videos exploded on the platform. Bubsy 4D, if it lives up to the very high quality demo, will be the first game in the series history that isn't either bad on purpose, or the butt of the joke that the game itself was making at it. Bubsy 4D not only feels really great to just jump around and master its movement, but it can make a statement that lasts beyond even its own franchise. There have been a lot of gaming IPs that were brought back from the dead to essentially say, hey, remember how bad I am? And those games were still bad, so no one wanted them. Bubsy 4D is out here saying that you can make fun of yourself, but you can't forget to make a good game in the process. Not only finally seeing Bubsy have a genuinely good game under its belt, potentially setting the standard for this type of revival, but also bringing back another banger to the ever-growing lineup of genuinely good 3D platformers that have been building up in the past decade or so in the indie scene, is something that has me incredibly hyped on this stupid fucking cat. So I've really been into RPGs lately. I'll go into more detail as to why, maybe in another video, but in the past 5 months or so, I've beaten The Outer Worlds 2, Disco Elysium, Fallout 3, and New Vegas, started both KOTOR and Planescape Torment, and put several hours into both Skyrim and Oblivion, and I'm pretty sure I'm missing at least one or two of them. Something that I discovered, though, through all of this is not only do I really love RPG games, but it also turns out that I really like Bethesda games, which is something merely 3 years ago I would have never conceived of ever saying, let alone believing. But something finally clicked with me, and their still relatively signature formula of, let's just say, explorative game design, or as I like to call them, power fantasy RPGs. Now, Bethesda Studios weren't always this loosey-goosey with their games. The formula and format has roughly always been the same since Morrowind, but that game is famously said to be an incredibly punishing hardcore RPG, which is something that I will loosely agree with. Regardless though, Bethesda doesn't make hardcore RPGs. It's a bygone era for Bethesda, and one that doesn't get represented even by these recent Scrolls-likes that have been coming out, such as Tainted Grail. What makes Ardenfall interesting is that it is self-described by the developers to be a Morrowind-inspired RPG. From the demo that I played, I can confirm that it has a very similar pace and feel to Morrowind specifically, and even though the demo is rather short, covering essentially the tutorial, 2 quest lines, and an optional dungeon, the game promises so much with like 5 different ways to complete the demo, each with their own unique outcome and inevitable effect on the rest of the game world in the main game. It also feels incredibly smooth, and the combat, no matter what style you decide to tackle it in, is super satisfying with a quick dodge, a really reliable quick wheel, and fun elemental abilities that keep the encounters very tense and engaging. But my favorite thing with RPGs are dialogue systems, and the way that skill checks can interact with the game world. Each NPC that you can interact with has an individual reputation tracker that can be affected by all kinds of things, like your clothes, the town's reputation, what you've done outside of the questline that you're on, or inside the questline that you're on, even down to whether or not your character is dirty. And beyond that, the way that your traits that you choose for your character can affect dialogue is honestly kind of staggering. I've beaten the demo 3 times, each playing wildly different characters, and the interactions that I've had with these NPCs and the skill checks that the dialogue system allows have led to drastically different information, and each build I had allowed different interactions with each of the main NPCs to interact with. That alone has my attention, but seeing the Morrowind era represented here is a nice breath of fresh air that is very much used to the more modern Bethesda-style games being either made by Bethesda or attempted to be recreated by other studios. Time will tell if it is as deep and depthful as the demo alludes to. Despite Pragmata being one of the most AAA releases on the list, if not the most, I think that this somehow ends up being one of the weirdest games to look out for. Simply explaining this one to someone who hasn't played it is honestly a tricky endeavor, but I think once you understand what this game is asking out of you, it becomes a genuinely addicting gameplay loop. So, if you don't know what it is, Pragmata, at its core, is just a third-person shooter where you're shooting robots of various types. But what makes it initially interesting is that each robot essentially has a shield that your bullets do incredibly little against, but it introduces this fantastic gameplay twist of a little robot girl on your shoulder that will be able to take the shield down and allow you to deal enough damage to kill them. But the simple addition of having a mechanic where you break the defenses of robots wouldn't be enough on its own. Nier Automata did something pretty similar many years ago, but what makes Automata much less cool in comparison is that when you would break the defenses of your enemies, it would essentially take place in a sub-game where you would be playing a bullet hell for a moment, and then once you've won or lost, you would come out of that minigame and then continue to attack and play the game as normal. What Pragmata does with this concept is make you navigate a maze from one node to another to break down the defenses of your enemies. And you're doing this with the face buttons on your controller in real time. So while you're trying to avoid damage and shoot, at the same time, you're playing this minigame on top of it. This sounds complicated and confusing, and it might be at first, but let me tell you, once it clicks with you, it is unlike anything else you've ever played. It's fast-paced, it's frantic, and literally each successful attempt at these node mazes is a rush of endorphins. From simple androids to huge mecha monstrosities, the puzzles get steadily more and more complex with small little gameplay additions like a node that will hit multiple targets at once. Everything is based around these 4 face buttons, from solving puzzles or activating elevators. Pragmata is proof that Capcom is on a roll. There's a demo out now, and if the full game is anything like the demo, this will be a staple at AGDQ for years. Each time I've beaten the demo, I almost immediately just started again to try to beat my time from the last run. Give me this shit! You didn't think that at least one Souls-like would appear on this list, did you? Valor Mortis is an unexpected new game from the developers that made Ghost Runner, the super fast-paced parkour cyberpunk ninja action game that came out a while back. Now, going from a very arcadey-influenced hack-and-slash that is all about speed, and then slowing it down to essentially a crawl in comparison with the first-person Souls-like, is quite the 540. But the DNA linking these two games together is present enough to see how it is indeed still the same studio that made Ghost Runner. I think the biggest hurdle that Valor Mortis has to overcome from simply an advertising standpoint is, how do you translate a Souls-like into first person? It may sound simple at first, but if you think about it, the genre is all about positioning and tactful dodging, and translating that into first person will become a prescient issue in the game's inherent design. The limited visibility that first person gives you drastically diminishes your ability to gauge distance and see the world around you. There is a reason that the genre has little to zero first-person iterations on the formula, and it's more than simply because third-person has been the norm for the genre's entire existence. But I think Valor Mortis is the real deal. Back when the game was announced, there was a playtest that you had to sign up for, and through that playtest, I beat the available demo more than 4 times, and I walked away with very, very similar feelings that I had after beating the demo for Lies of P. While you have your standard melee sword attacks that you would expect out of a Souls-like, you were also given a handgun that you can use to pop enemy weak points, as well as very Bioshock-esque powers such as shooting flames from your palm. But really, if I'm being honest, as far as the mechanics go, outside of the ability to shoot a gun, this is a traditional Souls-like pretty much through and through, but simply in first person. And I mean that in the best way possible. What the fuck? This game fucking rips, dude! And not only that, it is an incredibly solid feeling one. Just like Lies of P, there is very little jank for a non-From Software Souls-like, and I think that this is easily one of the most important factors in this specific genre. From the movement to the attack animations, everything here seems polished to a sheen, and given the studio's past games, I think it might potentially end up feeling even more polished than something like Lies of P. Time will tell, but I know from the outset that this game is gonna be something special. Its movement is solid, its combat is intense and difficult, but never feels impossible, and overall it is simply a blast to play. I walked away from the initial playtest begging for more, and even if people are sick of the genre by this point, I am always gonna be hyped for another entry that feels this solid. I almost feel bad putting this game so high on the list with as little about it as I'm going to, but Slay the Spire 1 is one of, if not the best game that I've ever played that I'm still absolutely dogshit in. I've had my game unintentionally reset 2 times over the years that I've played it, and I think even still, the furthest that I've ever gotten is Ascension 4 with 1 character. But believe me when I say that the original game is still easily one of the best games ever made. It is, in my opinion, the perfect roguelike. It is not only an amazing game, and it not only set the standard for deck-building roguelikes, but it essentially is the framework of the modern indie roguelike. So how can I not be excited for its sequel? It promises to be bigger, better, more depthful, and from the snippets of information that has been released about the game leading up until this release next month, I have literally not a single reason to doubt them. I've come back to Slay the Spire over the course of its lifetime many, many, many times, even after I thought I was done with it. It is the quintessential game to have background noise on for me. Despite my inability to get really good at the game, I always find the loop of trying to find that perfect broken deck that just demolishes my enemies to be far too addicting, and I cannot wait to come back to the sequel years from now, ready to shuffle another pain into my deck and into my life when I fail yet another run. Incoherence Dark Rooms is suited to be one of the first, if not the first, blueprints-like. It also has one of the easiest elevator pitches of all time. Blueprints, but survival horror. And genuinely, if that alone doesn't sell you on it, I'm not sure what else there is here for you. The blueprints that Blueprints laid out for everyone are here in full display, but with some genuinely nice little tweaks that make it feel a bit more refined in some cases, while also retaining that same sense of mystery and wonder that Blueprints gave all of us. And yet some of the potentially frustrating aspects of Blueprints, at least to me, have been mitigated just enough that I think it is very likely that it will still find its audience without much of a hitch. So what's the deal? Well, being a Blueprints-like means that you're going to be scrounging around in an ever-changing house that you expand as you go with a suite of room options at your disposal. What Dark Rooms does differently right out of the gate is expand your options at a reasonable pace, but also behind a somewhat new mechanic, which are your Polaroids. Right at the very beginning of the game, you're given a batch of these, which will give you a small selection of rooms that will be an option whenever you open a new door. Just like Blueprints, you're given 3 options at a new room, so it's not like you have full control of whatever room you want to enter, but you're guaranteed these very few rooms and no more than that from the start. As you progress further into the game, you'll solve very traditional survival horror style puzzles, such as decoding the sequencer in a basement to power the rest of the house, and finding the location of a VHS tape to use in the living room's television. Solving these puzzles will grant you new items as well as a new batch of Polaroids that will slowly expand your repertoire of rooms that you'll be allowed to access in the future. On top of this, there is a new quality of life system that some might find ruins some of the magic of Blueprints, but to me, it was something that felt so obvious as an iteration of the original game, which is having an in-game notepad. This is even doubly cool as you not only have a general notepad at your disposal, but each room has its own unique notepad. So if you ever stumble across something that doesn't quite add up for you at the time, you can just open up the map, jot down your little conundrum for that room, and then the next time you start up another run, that room will have that note ready to go when you walk back in. While this does mean that a lot of the obsessive note-taking from Blueprints won't be in your notebook for you to look back on, that isn't to say that you just can't do that anyway. But the option of having it ready on hand in the game itself is just a nice option to have. It'll be there for you whenever you need it. Now, the demo for the game will officially release this year, but in the amount of the game that I've been graciously allowed to play, there is also a stalker enemy that will relentlessly hunt you through your manufactured maze, which adds a spice of genuine tension and horror to Dark Rooms. Oh my god! But only time will tell how much combat will actually be in the full release. I do know from release screenshots and videos and talking to the developer that there will be more traditional combat in the game, but to what extent that will be, we will have to wait and see. Of all of the games that are on this list, I think Dark Rooms holds the most promise as something that can blow up the genre as a whole. In the same way that Balatro blew up a very specific type of roguelike, I think Blueprints laid the groundwork for an explosion of games that will follow in its footsteps. And not only is Dark Rooms potentially the very first one of that new burgeoning subgenre, but I think that it alone being a survival horror game will make it a testament of the genre entirely. If it can follow through on its premise, I think that Incoherence Dark Rooms will stand the test of time as a pillar of the genre. The concept alone of Dark Rooms is enough to get me hyped for it, but after having actually played it, the potential here is through the roof. The demo for the game will be available later this year. Now, before I get to number 1, I do want to quickly just shout out an honorable mention, which is Silent Hill Townfall. This is more or less me directing you to a different video after this one is finished about my thoughts and feelings on the reveal of Townfall, but long story short, it looks amazing. On to number 1. And it should come as no surprise that as a horror lover, my most anticipated game of the year is Resident Evil Requiem. No, I'm just kidding. No game in recent history has sucked the hype out of me as much as this one has. Maybe I'll talk about it later. My most anticipated game of 2026 is CLAM MAN 2. Now, you may be looking at this little blue CLAM MAN and say, why the hell would I be interested in this? Disco Elysium is a game that I finally beat a few months ago, and it reset my brain when it comes to looking at games. People have said for years, since its release, that it has some of, if not the best writing in any video game since arguably Planescape Torment. I firmly believe this sentiment, but I think that it made me realize that I've essentially been eating slop for decades when it comes to game writing. Sure, there are outliers, many that I won't even bother naming, but I think that for like 95% of the games that we all love, we underestimate how much that a well-written game can completely turn something on its head. Disco Elysium made me angry how good it was written, because now no other game that I play can make me feel the way that Disco did. But another thing that people overlook about Disco, it's fucking hysterical. And this just builds on my point of the quality of Disco's writing. If writing for a game is hard, then writing comedy for a game is exponentially harder. If you fail at writing comedy for a game, then not only is it annoying and a slog to sit through, but it negatively affects everything else that you do in that game. There aren't many genius mechanics that can override tedious and annoying, poorly written comedy. All of that is to say that CLAM MAN 2 is one of the best written games I've had the pleasure of playing since beating Disco Elysium, and that means that its writing, even outside of the comparison to Disco, means it's fucking astounding. CLAM MAN 2 is a sequel to a point-and-click puzzle game that no one played. Its sequel is now a Disco Elysium-like. Everything from the way that the text is represented on the screen, to the way that your skills perform secret background checks, to the way that you can have internal dialogues that are interacting with the world around you. This is Disco to a T. But instead of trying to solve a murder that goes into political climates, you're CLAM MAN, who hates his job at a mayonnaise factory and stumbles upon an opportunity to become a stand-up comedian. In its available demo, you'll interact with a conspiracy theorist, an ex-conspiracy theorist, build a bomb, get run over by a car, discover a mammoth, find a genuinely convincing theory for calculating awkwardness, and befriend a gang of Supermen. CLAM MAN 2 has quests, but instead of loot, you gain material for jokes, and the demo ends with your first real stand-up set. And by the time that you perform on stage, you'll be so endeared to CLAM MAN and his plight to discover his inner comedian that if you're anything like me, you'll want to play the full game immediately. I laughed harder with CLAM MAN 2 than I have at any game in a long time. It is shockingly consistently funny, witty, clever, and makes me realize that same feeling of annoyance that I did with Disco, where I'm seeing the writing unfold in front of me, and I'm almost angry that games have settled for less when it comes to comedy.
Oh no.
CLAM MAN 2 is here to show you how you make funny video games. And as a bonus fact, this game is being made by, I'm pretty sure, one dude. I praised Expedition 33 last year for its small team, but honestly, Expedition 33 can eat my ass in comparison to the amount of effort that CLAM MAN 2 is putting on display here. It radiates passion, and its narrative of trying to find something that you love is something that speaks to me on a fundamental level. CLAM MAN 2 as a game, as a narrative, and hell, as a fucking book, is a life-affirming experience, one that I think most people will appreciate far more than anyone is giving it credit for. I am clamoring for more CLAM MAN. And if you're watching this, Mr. CLAM MAN, please let me voice someone in your game. I will do anything. So yeah, those are my top most anticipated games of the year. There's going to be a lot of good ones. It's going to be a good year for video games. It's going to be hell for America. Love your face, love your show. Fuck ice.
Tomato is a fruit, but it's also a vegetable.
Oh golly gee, what jubilous fun! What a wonderful time for a hit and run!